What's up, agents? Welcome to the 7th episode of the TCG Core podcast. I swear I'm going to change the name just so I don't keep butchering the intro. This is like the third time, I think, y'all. It is what it is. How is everybody doing? That's how I'm going to start.
Three times the charm, my friend. I am doing good. It's good to be back on the podcast. Good to see everybody. Excited about some topics for tonight. It's been a little bit.
Yeah. I feel like we got some good stuff to talk about. Things that have happened, some things that have some future implications. So yeah, ready to dive right in.
Bet. Yeah, man. I'm surprised that I'm so conscious. For those of y'all we're recording today, it's the 21st. I played in the Dragon Ball Regional today. Did pretty good, I think. Did pretty good. So it's like 7 hours of Dragon Ball, 8 hours of Dragon, whatever it was. And we're still here. We'll talk about that later. I don't want to jump into that now. The first thing, I actually just want to jump straight into this Digimon Banlist because I feel like I keep seeing discussions about it. Since I've started playing Digimon again, people have been talking about it. So I'm just curious to hear one of y'all's thoughts first, and then I'll kind of jump in with mine.
Yeah, I mean, well, we talked about it briefly right before we hopped on this, and it's interesting. So just to run down really quick, we got a ban list released. Was it now 4 days ago, on the 17th? That will go into effect on November 17th. That hit 5 cards. First one is the starter deck 6 Gabumon, basically the inheritable that has the when attacking, draw 1, trash 1, and then we also have the BT2 Gabu on deletion, draw 2, trash 1. They hit the BT13 Geogray, which everybody kind of thought was going to happen earlier. It didn't, but then ended up getting hit anyway. People kind of thought it would be Geogray or the BT12 Marcus Damon. Yeah. It was going to be one or the other. I think hitting this Geogray is better because Marcus is, even though Marcus is a strong card, it's very specific to one deck, where this we've already seen being abused in other yellow decks, even red decks too. So you have that. One we can talk about that I've been personally a little bit confused about is the EX4 Mach Galgamon. I know Mirage Gal is good, but again, it's very specific, it's very niche, but I don't know. It does have kind of a general when attacking effect, so I think maybe that's where that's coming from. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, they finally banned the other half of the Eismon package. Scatter mode finally got the boot. So now you can only run 1 and 1. So the interesting thing to go through all of those is out of the 5 cards they limited, 3 of them were purple, and probably some of the best purple cycle cards that we have. So I think it's really interesting. I think I don't want to say it's long overdue. I'm a huge purple player. I love purple. But these cards, without a doubt, are some of the strongest cards in purple. I mean, purple lives off of playing out of its trash and, cycling and seeing its cards because it's so combo heavy that you need to see those pieces. So yeah, having these cards limited is really going to shake up how purple players approach how they now deck build, because you have to find alternatives. You have to find maybe different strategies. People might get a little weird with it. So I'm kind of curious to see, as much as it's kind of like, oh man, I wish I wouldn't have seen him go. I'm kind of interested to see what people come up with, So yeah, I think it's kind of interesting.
This feels a little bit like a correction that they've been doing, where I'm gonna say his name wrong. Argomon level 5, who got limited before it even hit here. The level 5 with Digizorb and Swing put a suspended rookie down. And that was when attacking too, not once per turn. Got hit really instantly, and then we had Blossomon for a while that was just kind of allowed, but now recently has been reined in. We're like, no, we still think it's too good. We're going to bring that one back as well. And it hit specific decks like Bloom Lord, but I think it changed how deck players build decks anyways, because those were an auto-include 5, unless I had a specific strategy with level 5. The Eismon is really good, and it's funny that we talk about the combo. Like, we can talk about Gabu and the other Gabu both getting hit, and that obviously punching like Garurumon decks and like other decks. But what the combo I really think they're getting rid of is the Eismon, Gabumon, Demi-Meramon, which is the draw 3, trash 2, draw 2, trash 1, draw 1, trash 1. Phenomenal setup. It is, I believe we've gone on record, it's like what, draw 7, trash 5 is essentially what it boils down to. And I love that combo, but it feels like that's the most punishing thing they're going for. Dan, I actually thank you that you pointed out that the Gabu with the when attacking from the star deck, who I love, was once per turn. I think I played that in Titamon. It was the only place I ever used it. I don't think I used it like that. I don't think I ever double dipped. But I forgot that the starter deck Gabu is kind of the same, right? It's start a main phase. If your opponent has a Digimon, you gain a memory, and then it's inheritable as once per turn. Draw one card, trash one card when attacking. So it's cool because you're still gonna be able to run 5 of those, and it's almost gonna be like the 5th baby, or rather like not the 5th baby, but like the 4 babies you run for consistency, and 1 for the other option. I think that's gonna be kind of funny where you're like, oh, I got the good one where I can like swing and trash and swing and trash. You might pay more attention to that. Mock Algamon to me feels like an Ultimate Cup ban. I think it's done very well in Ultimate Cups, and you're right because I think the Mirage Galgamon deck is good. I like that they have other options. Even recently, I think they got like 2 to 3 more options. So it's not like it's back to BT4 where they only have one and it's bad. They now have like ones they were like already not using because that one felt more consistent. But that did feel like an Ultimate Cup band to me where it's been really dominant. And Blue has had quite a few decks. I mean, as well with Purple, but it has really good showings in all of the Ultimate Cup tournaments. And then we didn't even talk about the coolest part. I am interested to hear, but like Geograve made sense. But the fact that cards came off.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the fact that it was, well, for me, if you couldn't, well, it's the wrong map. This is my Dragon Ball map. But the fact that like Savior Huck came off was like really cool. I'm already trying to tool around with ideas of like making it relevant. I really don't know because like I think Jesmon has, for example, has so many different tools and things to choose from in and of itself that I don't even know if you want to run that at like 4 anymore, to be honest. Maybe like 2 or 3, but I feel like that's a totally different kind of Jesmon build to try and bring that back and make use of it. But Tom, I guess I'm glad that he came off just for the sake of like Blue and like, oh, you can do more source stripping and like with Zudomon and like it'll be cool to see. But God, I feel like I'm gonna hate it because you know some of y'all are gonna be out here trying to make Blue Hybrid work, and Blue Hybrid's gonna be y'all's dream, and I'm not excited about that because I don't want BT6 PTSD anymore. But or BT7, I don't remember what set it was. I don't want to remember that era of Digimon again. But I mean, it's cool.
Yeah, I think with I gotta say I'm not honestly surprised. I'm surprised the cards came back, but then when we heard first that okay, cards came back, when I'm thinking okay, what cards could come off, Savior was definitely one of the first ones that I thought of because as much as I still think Jesmon is a solid deck option, I like Agent said, I don't think this Savior coming back really like propels the deck to like new heights because we have other saviors that are arguably just as good if not better in some cases. So I think it's cool that it allows you to have, you're not having to like pick and choose, like you're only be limited to certain level 5s. You can kind of mix and match if you want depending on your strategy you want to go with. But it's kind of cool that came off. As far as Tommy goes, I feel like it's kind of the same thing, right? Where yes, Tommy is still like a strong card, like the just Source Strip 3, and of course you can pair it with your with your 2 level 4 hybrids that you used to play for. I know there's more hybrids now, but that would do the whole stunning and all that. I just don't feel stunning is as powerful as it used to be, let's say in BT7 format. Number one, X antibody is a card. It wasn't back in BT7. You cannot strip that card. So if you can't strip if there's just one source remaining, usually those stuns are conditional upon being sourceless. Well, you can't be sourceless if you can't strip the X antibody. So there's that. I know not every deck runs X antibody, but the point is there's more outs to that card than there used to be, back in BT7 format. We all remember that. So I think it's cool that it came back. Just in the sense that same way. I'm all for deck variants. I'm all for creativity in decks. So I'm curious to see, like, I don't know if this is just going to solely bring back, OG, BT7 Blue Hybrid, or people are going to tool around with it and maybe put it in. I don't know. You could put it in Blue Hybrid, Blue Flare. You could put it in O4s because they run Tamers. Like, there's so many different options you could probably do with that. So I'm curious to see what people kind of tool around with it. What the more implicating thing for me is, and I don't, maybe you guys share in the same sentiment, is this shows me that they're willing to bring cards back off of the list. So I'm curious to see as time goes on if cards may come back in some capacity, or maybe we've talked about this before, I think, where it's like, well, they have you have 3 different categories. You have unlimited, which is all 4. You have your limited, which is just 1, and then you have your ban. Maybe they do something where it's like you can only play 2 copies, or you can only play 3 copies, or something like that. So I think them doing that, it's kind of opens the door for that conversation of like, I wonder what they might do in the future.
I love that sentiment, because you stole the words out of my mouth about them being willing to take things off. But what I like about that too is, before when we talked about maybe getting 2 cards, or maybe stuff coming up, or like more than one permanent ban, or not permanent, but like our ban's truly permanent. And now we have an answer that they are listening, or rather, maybe not even that they're listening, but they are tooling around with it. I agree with the Savior Huck thing. I feel like we're not back in BT6, BT7, where Jessamon wants to swing, check all your shields, and then, like a little guy finishes you off, or he unsuspends and does it himself. I mean, obviously Jessamon's faster and different, but like it wants to go for blitz plays, and it has different stuff. The only implication I can see for like, and I've just started thinking about, was like being able to see it engraved, though, does guarantee if you Chimeramon, you'll be able to like tuck that one, which is like a really always interesting like Jessamon tech. And then you're technically red as well. But I'm so cool. The Tommies right now, if you have a box topper Tommy, they're $10 right now. I was gonna say I don't want to date the video, but I know you guys did that earlier, so we can get away with that. I do feel like Tommy is the scarier unban. Because like with Savior's good, it's very good, but we've kind of evolved away from that gameplay where Tommy is still something relevant and something that can be splashed. But I don't think you're alone in thinking that, Dan, because the number one excuse or like response I've got is, X antibody exists though, and everyone can run X antibody. And I don't think it's all decks, but like even some of the decks coming out later when we get more X antibody, or decks that are utilizing it, I don't think he's as scary. Also, Jet Sophie Wen.
Yeah.
Jet Sophie Wen.
Man, I didn't want to be the one to bring
Jet
it up.
Sophie Wen?
Oh, God.
I had to do it for you because I knew you weren't getting it too hard. But like, that one still feels unfair to come off the ban list. Like that warped deck building in such a way. I think Tommy is healthy to bring back in some responses, especially for if we get more rookie rush stuff. People might start flexing back into the Tommy stuff with the stunning, and we've had a tower meta for so long that I'm kind of waiting to see if we slump into other stuff. And some of the cards are pushing even like way down the line, though, could even hint to like potentially more rookie rush or swarmy decks in your future.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's interesting too about like Tommy is like, okay, Sora is a thing, like that in and of itself is already a million times arguably better just off the effect, right? Tommy's great because he's a tamer, so he enables all this other stuff, and there's like so many ways to kill tamers now. Like everybody, well, I shouldn't say everybody can do it, but a lot of different decks have the ways to deal with that. Specifically Greymon, it's just Hades Force and wipe the board of tamers. So yeah, like I think Tommy's gonna be the most splashable. You'll see people experiment with it the most, I think, because you can put it in damn near anything, and it can do things. I think it's the most interesting thing is gonna be like a Zudomon, like blue tamer or blue hybrid thing, because Zudomon's like, cool, I can strip out 2 sources from different bodies simultaneously and then bounce or freeze. I can't remember. I want to say it bounces, but between that and Tommy, like I think there's gonna be a lot of blue freezing is gonna be very difficult thing, I think, to deal with in general, and Tommy's just something that slides into that playstyle. And then to your point, both of y'all were saying about Savior. Yeah, like I think with Savior, the best thing it can do is you could basically go into it for free, right? You go on top of the new the new bow and the new Huck that will give you a memory. So then you're playing a sister. If you play CL, you basically just plus a memory off of going into him. So like that's kind of cool. Like I think there's some fun stuff that you could do, or with Chimeramon you could do some fun stuff because you could theoretically put the up to 4 memory gaining Hucks and bows under one stack, gain 4 memory when you play a Sistermon. Like that's kind of cool. And then absorb, and like I think there's stuff there. I think it's just sort of like, is it gonna be better than just playing the deck the way that it's been played for the past couple formats with the Jessamon X and the God, I can't even think of the level 7 right now. My brain is not working.
The GX.
GX.
The GX, yes, and the and the GX, like, is it gonna be comparable or better? I don't know. I feel like Digimon is just starting to get to the point, especially with these adjustments to the ban list, where like you can take 2 or 3 decks that have the same top end and actually really diversify like how it gets there, which I think is really cool. That we're finally, I feel like, getting to that point where you're seeing a little more diversity among the colors like that.
Oh yeah, 100%. And kind of a little segue into that, because you kind of mentioned, the Zudamon and everything kind of going into set 14 a little bit, is, you kind of see that like with set 14. And I mean, I know a lot of players, like the Resurgence booster, this reprint set that we got was kind of cool. And I think, player wise, it was nice to be able to get like some affordable like staples that you couldn't before. But in terms of, like you were saying, diversity, we didn't get a lot of it. BT14 coming up in a few weeks, I feel like there is going to be some diversity, introduced in that. Of course, we get ace cards and all that. So I think that paired with, again, these different limits and unlimits, I think it's really going to shake up, like I mentioned, player deck building, which is always a fascinating concept for me, because I've said this time and again, I feel like I'm not a strong deck builder. I kind of just see what's out there and then just kind of tool it to like my preference and go from there. So it's very interesting when I am going through those different lists and things that are, people are trying to mess around with, and it's like, oh, I didn't even think of that, and or doing these combos or whatever. So I'm really interested to see what kind of comes out of results from that. So I do have to say one little thing though, because you brought up Jet Sylphie. Age and I were talking about this because when the ban list came up, we obviously have like offline conversations about it. Of course, we talk about it and stuff, and it's like I brought up that point of they bring back Tommy, but they don't bring back Jet Sylphie, and I'm like, the issue that I have, as much as I am a yellow stan and I would love to see Jet Sylphie come back, a 1-cost recover 1 to then go into Venusmon or go into you got all these pretty strong yellow level 6s. I mean, Kintarosmon, the BT13 Kintarosmon is really strong that you could do on top of a Jet Sylphie, and then on top of that, there's so many strong options that could get recovered. These tamers that are out there, so it's like and then again, that's where like the Geo Gray comes in, right? You can play the Geo Gray, you could play out a tamer, and then you can go into Jet Sylphie. Sure, it'd be for 3, but like there's just so much that you could do that I think in terms of meta defining, Tommy has a little bit of manipulation that could happen, but I think Jet Sylphie, there's more potential problematic things that could come out of it, just because like it can enable so much more. So I don't, as hopeful as I'd love to see Jet Sylphie come off, I don't see it coming off anytime soon, just because of that, unfortunately.
No, I think you're entirely right. Jet Sylphie warped deck building where you didn't run rookies, or you could, if you didn't want to. You would tamer, you would go into it, and then you would go to a big level 6, and you had these Ophani gets you an extra recovery on top of that. Like, you just had some toxic stuff. And I joke because like I still miss Mega Digimon Fusion. And that card's way more busted than Jet Sylphie was. But like I can also be like, oh, I had fun with it while it existed, but I also understand why we're at where we're at. You mentioned Just One GX. I'm probably pointing the wrong way for camera, but whatever. And you talked about Kintarosmon. I combined the two recently because I forgot he has the ability to Digivolve on top of Royal Knights.
Yep.
Going into Kintoros, gaining back 3 memory and like recovering, then going into GX, tucking a Kintoros, activating the Kintoros, gaining 3 more, recover another one, and then you've Digivolved into it for 2. Is bonkers. I'm so hype about it. You both just managed to bring up both of the pieces of this combo I've been cooking, and like it feels so good. Oh, it's man, I don't even know where to transition into this because I was gonna say, Resurgence set. So okay, last thing on ban list. We would be remiss to not mention how dominant some purple decks have been in Japan, with the Minerva loop being re-enabled by Anubismon. Belphemon Sleep Mode still being like a good deck. You have upcoming decks like Leviamon. This also really punishes like Bielstarmon, though I don't think she needed to be punished. So I think all of these purple decks have really forced Bandai into a corner a bit, and this almost feels like, I mean, not to say that it's not for us, but it feels preemptive banning for us. Yeah. Whereas like it's already a problem there, which I also see why people were like more being like, oh, this is anti-Gabu because all this Gabu stuff's coming out, and I'm like, I agree it's going to be good, man, and it definitely hits that deck. but we are aiming at purple as a color.
Mm-hmm.
They're not really. We're gonna take some decks out on the way, but like it kind of needed to be done. And then Resurgence set, you're right. What I love about the value staple, I have been calling it an anti-value set. And I don't mean that as like it doesn't have value. I mean it that it plummeted cards that were insanely expensive. Magnet Angemons were $60 a piece, and now I can play weird jank yellow green Megazoo if I want because I can get my hand on that card. People have Lucimons. It was a really interesting set, but I love that it people ask you like, oh, what's the highest card you could pull in it? And I'm like, the Alt-Art Secret, like most sets, and it's not that expensive because people are pulling it. Honestly, you are pulling it if you want to get into this game and like you need to clear good cards. Although that Gabu was just reprinted in the Resurgence pack. So
well, what's interesting too, you got to remember that Resurgence set is really small too. Like the set number is really small. So in terms of pull rates, I mean, you're bound to in a full booster box, you're bound to pull those type of ratios, optimistically. So the one thing I want to touch on, because you brought up a good point about purple, is, and this will probably be I'm gonna earmark this for my errata for next time. Is I think it's interesting, and maybe you guys can agree or disagree with me. I think purple probably has the highest skill ceiling in terms of color archetypes in this game, only because of the fact that you have to be very cognizant of all of your trashing, all of your resources, because you have to focus on all of your areas, not just what's in your hand. Because usually, like with red, with green, with even yellow, decks like that, black, whatever. Once they hit your trash, they're pretty much gone. So I don't have to worry about it anymore. The only reason I'm looking at it is like, okay, what have I used? Like, whatever. But when you're playing purple, pretty much everything in your trash is still live for the most part. So you're having to keep up with that. You're also having to know, okay, well, in order to enable this play, I got to trash this many, and I can't mill myself out. I have to. So I feel like in that sense, purple has one, if not the highest, one of the highest skill ceilings in just terms of color. I'm not talking specific decks, whatever. Just as an archetype, right? So if you consider that, it's interesting to say we're gonna deal back the power levels of that archetype as a whole, even though knowing it's one of the harder archetypes to master. So I think that's just an interesting dynamic to think about, that of like, they have it, and maybe I can spin it this way, that they have that much faith in their players of being like, we do think our players are that skillful to be like, we can't let this color just continue to do what it does, because you're going to have all of these players that can play the game really well and just abuse it because these cards are as strong as they are.
Yeah. Well, I also think that, like, I would agree that purple has the most decisions out of any color. It's the most decision heavy, but I also think it is also really good even if you're like a newbie. And what I mean by that is, like, once you learn, oh, I have access to every single card in my deck almost at any time, right? Like, for the most part, like, you're cycling so much that, like, once you kind of figure out what your game plan is, I wouldn't say the skill ceiling is gone. Then it goes back to, like, the ultimate Digimon, like, I don't know what we call the great equalizer of RNG for your opponent and security, right? Where it's like, it almost, if the game is a runaway train, it almost doesn't matter if the opponent's deck does what it wants to do for the most part, because you've already set up you have access to everything almost at all times, and, like, it's just a runaway train game. But I would agree that I do think that purple has, like, it takes the most time and practice to really get comfortable with and know what you're doing and do it well. But it also has so many tools to make it easy to do that it's like, it's a really weird kind of interaction, I feel like.
Well, I'll make this one example, right? Obviously, we'll go back to Beelzemon structure deck coming out, right? Everybody and their mother was like, I'm just going to go get 2 Beelzemon starter decks. I might get a couple extra cards to splash in there. Boom, I've got the best deck of the format, right? So that, you have that. And arguably, Beelzemon for a time was the best deck in the format, regardless of ultimate format, whatever. So anybody could pick it up. And then and we know this because we would play against new players, new Aura players, or people that, wouldn't generally play purple or things like that, and play it and be like, man, why, But here's where I'll make the caveat to it is, yes, I agree with that to the extent of, like, that deck gave you access to everything, and if you could set up, you could do well. But the difference was, and this is where I think that skill ceiling conversation still has a little bit of relevance, in that these I don't want to say lesser skilled, because I'm not. You get what I mean, though.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Right. It's they would outplay themselves, right?
Yes.
Because, like you said, there's so much decision making in there that I think that's where that skill ceiling aspect still plays a little bit of a part of, like, yeah, you could still see your whole deck, you could still set up, and then it's hard for your opponent to play around. But there's so many more opportunities for mistakes, and if you don't have that type of awareness to be able to play the deck how it should be played and like sequence properly and make those micro decisions and all that, you're gonna play yourself out of the game.
Right.
So like I said, I think it's interesting that they're taking, not obviously it's only 3 of them, but they're taking 3 of the strongest like decision making cards out of purple, because you know you're looking at your trash and you say, okay, I got to trash these and discard those and you know do all this kind of stuff. It's like, well, you remove that. I wonder how that's going to alter, you know, those, like, I don't want to, again, not lower skill player, but the players that aren't typically purple players or things like that, and now they can kind of approach purple in a little bit different of a light. You know what I mean?
I definitely think you're going for less experience, because experience pays the way in purple decks.
Yeah.
Because you're totally right. When you know your combos, you know your lines, you know what you're going for, it becomes very streamlined deck. And those who, like even me, I've played a lot of combo purple with like, oh my god, and I have access to everything and I can drop it all, and I still like just get bodied. And you're like, oh right, because I didn't know, I didn't play it enough. I just theorized all these things. I hope it's one of 2 things. And like my thought about was, these are very powerful cards, very, very powerful cards. And I wonder if, to tie on to our idea of things eventually coming off the ban list, is this purple is ahead of all the other colors by such a margin that we need to remove these pieces and see where it settles. And then maybe that comes back when we like power up some of these other decks that are about to go back on the curve. Because we have been in off season, right? Like store championships happened. We're prepping for nationals. Like, regionals are going on until November. Then we have nationals. Then like stuff comes out in November that won't be legal for Nats or whatever. Or like, actually don't remember if it will be. But the point is like we're about to get fresh blood and fresh stuff. So I do feel like we've been stuck. And then my other hope is that like, so if it's not, purple is so powerful, we have to pull some cards back and we have to let it all balance. I wonder if they feel like trashing from deck is more fair, because trashing from hand to trash adds that middleman of decision making. And you're right, like you don't want to take some of the skill out of your game by being able to pilot and maneuver these things. But at the same time, I wonder if they're like the milling from deck is so random for us, or like just random enough that we feel like it still takes a lot of skill. But there's also luck involved, which we like the luck mechanic, like in security and everything else. So I feel like those are like the 2 camps people could be in about it.
That's actually, I never thought about it in that way, about like, yes, you're right. I think Digimon, and I said this earlier, and Dan and I talk about this all the time, there is like a very clear intentional RNG element built into the game. We can get into whether that's good or bad or how you feel about that. That's a whole other conversation. But I do think that, yes, if you're saying it's for, and that kind of goes back to what I was saying before about like feeling like it's not just about skill ceiling, not to discredit anything that Dan was saying, but I feel like it's also like this weird, like you play 5D chess, right? Like that's what you're doing. But I think that like when you do it from hand, it also adds like this weird level of like, you're cycling, right? Like you're gonna find what you want, and it's the consistency is almost too dangerous, I think, compared to now you have to decide, am I going to chance the top 3 cards or what I need or what I don't need? Which I think is an interesting way to refocus it, because it kind of makes it so that like it's more in line with every other color, and every color having its sort of like elements where it's like you don't really know what you're going to get and you kind of have to make do, which I think is also goes back to the Geo Greymon lift of like, cool, now yellow loses one more way to search through the security and just know what's in the security period. I mean, even red loses, like I mean, everybody loses that, right?
And we gave it to red. We just gave it to them.
Yeah. You know, so I think that like, yes, to your point, Frolly, I think that might be what they're considering, is like, how do we equalize this just a little bit more? So that everybody has to deal with our RNG system, whether people like it or not. You need to deal with it in some level, regardless of what color you pick.
Yeah, 100%. Because again, like you said, and that's something that, I mean, when I still struggle with this to this day, is like, you know, knowing that like if I sit down and play a game of Digimon or a whole day of worth of regional, I know what I'm getting myself into, knowing that no matter how well I feel like I play, I'm still subject to that RNG. And like you said, we can sit here and have it, like people can say what they want. They can, you know, people are going to, you know, whatever in the comments or whatever, but that is the reality of this game. There's no amount of applicable skill that will save you from a random security check. Nothing. There won't be. There's nothing I can do to set my board up as best I can with within a given turn to not hit a chaos deck or a Gaia Force in security, right? If I hit it, and that is what it is. So I feel like it's like those types of things, and we know this on the reverse end of it. Bless you. On the reverse end of it is, we'll be sitting here sometimes with our opponent getting ready to swing at us, and we're sitting here like, please be something in security, please be something in security, right? So we know that. We know because everybody has done that. Like when you're sitting down to your last one or two security and you're hoping there's something in there that's going to get you, you're literally hoping, you're hoping for RNG. So it's like, I definitely agree with that it's like to be able to kind of cycle the game kind of back towards that, where like you said, it kind of takes that decision making out of it, and it's just kind of like, well, I'm gonna have to hope that whatever I mill off of here, it kind of enables my gameplay, and if not, it could hurt me. But that's again part of the whole. That's what you're doing when you're playing this game. You pair, I'd say, 50% of decision making and skill with 50% RNG, and that's what makes up this game. So.
Yeah, if you want to call it the philosophy, is like a little bit RNG, a little bit of skill.
Yeah. Well, I was going to add onto that. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I was going to add on to that. And I think, Dan, we talked about this when I was playing Examon, right? Like, this game, it's a lot of, like, there's the RNG, but then there's the confidence in knowing, okay, I have all this stuff in my trash, and in my hand that, like, these next few cards have to be one of whatever this number is. And, like, I think, to your point, too, like, that's where, like, that skill ceiling comes in, especially with purple, of, like, hey, okay, I know what I'm digging through and I know where things are. And I think that's just hard to like really master when it comes to, I mean, any card game, but I think especially Digimon, because there's just so much where like you don't know. And like there's so little information gathering quickly like there is in Pokemon specifically, because after starting to learn how to play Pokemon, like I can just search my deck at like any time and know what's in my prizes by turn like 2. Okay. Or even Dragon Ball, where there's certain things you can do where like I can just search my deck and now I know where this stuff is and I can plan accordingly. It's just like Digimon doesn't want to go that route at all. But I do think that there is like the alternative of that, of still knowing how you can increase your consistency and knowing like what's around in your deck it's a whole skill in and of itself,
Oh yeah, and like I said, that's why I think like with purple, it's like I've said, I do think that I think the only thing I'll say about the whole skill ceiling thing is literally just the simple fact that being able to be like, okay, I know I have these cards and they're available to me. I just have to make sure I pick the right one. So I'm not saying that it's like you need to be an extremely skilled player in order to make that decision. It's just it like you said, agreeing with you is it's like you just have to be able to know, okay, at this point in the game, if I'm in this situation, I just need to make sure I pick this one. There's just there's more room for error as opposed to, like you said, with those other things where I just play an Agu, search top 3, okay, I just need this one, I'll grab that, right? Because there's just a little bit, there's a little additional layers to it is all. But yeah, to Frawley's point, I didn't even think about it that way. It's like being able to shift the from hand to from deck type of thing, I think will kind of perpetuate the whole philosophy of the game like that much more. And I think it'll be good for it, I think.
It's funny because they're not fully removing it. Like that still exists on Lady Devimon, right? You when Digivolving, draw 3 trash 2. But you draw 2 trash 2, but you get 1 for Digivolving. But I digress. Like it seems like if they're gonna do it, or it might just be one of those things where we printed it on a card that was too low. We now realize the Eismon was too low to be doing this stuff, but if you're gonna work to get a stack and then get a Digivolve off that costs you 3, yeah, like you could still have that effect. So it does seem like they're not like destroying it. I wonder if they're just trying to target specific problems. Because yeah, like tutoring and being able to see your deck, like I almost wish when I played I could see the poker statistics, because every time I'm like flipping to security, I feel like I can see that poster like that poker statistic where it's just like, oh, he's got a 10% chance that it's a Gaia Force in there. Let's see what it is. Rookie. Okay, nothing. Yeah. Okay. Well, he's now at a 15% chance. Like I wish I could see those numbers, because everyone's been sitting there being like, it's in my deck. It's not in my hand. I haven't seen it yet. Could be there. That does lead to some of the excitement, but I can see where people say that too much RNG takes some stuff out of it, and now you've let anyone have a chance. And I don't know what philosophies I like most. I do like some of the RNG elements of Digimon, just because we were even discussing earlier, Asia and I, when we were talking about like when I lose a game of Digimon, and actually Dan, I think Dan said directly in this podcast was, I know what I'm getting in for in a regional. Some things are out of my hands. Sometimes the cards just fall in a way that this was out of my hand. But it also makes it easier to shrug some stuff off, where you're just like, you know what, like that was out of my hands. Like it's almost easier for me to like shrug off tilt and just be like, oh, I had no chance. His security stacked. I was just done.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of funny, and it's easier to move on with it. And that either some people are gonna really gravitate to that, and I think some people are gonna be very polar opposite to that.
Yeah, I mean, like we were saying before the pod of like, yeah, like it's a huge thing. And now that I'm playing like 5 different games, 4 different, I don't even know anymore. Playing all these different games, like it's interesting experiencing all these different like philosophies of like how you win and like kind of like how you respond to loss specifically in those games. Like I would be very interested in like somebody doing like a psychological study on like competition in card games and like how each game affects a person, because it's just been wild to watch each one. So earlier today, I had the Dragon Ball Regional. I went all 8 rounds, placed 19th out of 172, third regional. It was a lot of fun. My boy Bardock it was a good time. But I have to say that like the end of every single game was good. Like every person we stayed, we talked after the games. We were like going back and forth about how we could have done stuff differently, what were you looking for? And it was like really weird compared to Digimon, which I've been playing nonstop more or less for the past 3 years. I don't even know at this
3
point.
years. November.
And y'all have seen it, and y'all have probably experienced where the game's over and the opponent immediately goes bye and just disconnect. There's no conversation. There's no nothing. Or like you're the person I try my hardest not to be that person. Y'all see me try, but like it happens. But like almost I think I've only had that happen in Dragon Ball like once or twice. And that was just like moments where like I could feel like they were upset that this was like their 3rd loss or their 4th loss or whatever it was for the day, and I got it. But like I think to your point, like the way people handle losses in Digimon and in other games is just different because of that. And I do think to become a better player at Digimon in general, I think that there's a certain mentality that you either have to adopt or know to avoid the tilt, because I think that the tilt in in Digimon and Yu-Gi-Oh are like the 2 biggest tilts I've ever experienced myself from a card game or seen people experience. Either because in Yu-Gi-Oh you can't play the goddamn game and it's turn 2 and you just can't play, or Digimon it's like somebody in the stream, I won't name drop him because I don't, it's fine. But if y'all were in the stream, he was just like really frustrated because his deck, he kept drawing level 6s, he kept drawing his tamers, and he couldn't, and that was after Mulligan. He couldn't do anything. And like, I'm like, yeah, I can understand for those people who are like, F this game, just because you feel like you can't play in those scenarios, which you can get into, oh, that's about deck building, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, yeah, but what are the odds still that you're going to draw all of your level 6s in your opening hand? Like, what can you do with that? So, yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting the more games that we play and seeing the philosophies behind each ones, and they're very clearly different and all valid.
I'm glad. I love that you made that point, because that's been something I've struggled with. Like when I very first starting into TCGs 5-6 years ago, competitively, and leading all the way up until now, that playing multiple ones has really altered my perspective. And I'm not going to say I never get tilt. I never get any TCG player is going to lie to you if they say, "Oh, I never get salted," right? Like that's not true. But at the same point, it's like I think it's a hard concept for a lot of TCG players to grasp if they consistently get that tilted at a game that they play. I understand the whole well, I get upset because I'm passionate about the game, and that's perfectly fine. You want to care enough about it, but you also have to understand, like, you should know what you're getting into when you sign up for whatever game that is that you're playing. If I play Digimon, like I said, I know that I'm getting into a game that has a very heavy RNG aspect. So there's some times where, like Frawley said, I'm just gonna have to walk away and be like, there's nothing I could have done about that guy's security stack. There was 3 removal options and 2 big bodies. Like, I'm just not surviving it, right? We play Dragon Ball, and my opponent does a really good job of filling their hand and being like, I'm just going to combo out of everything, or I'm going to negate whatever. Like, that's good deck building. That's good, resource management. in Pokemon, you could say the same thing where it's like, man, I can't believe my opponent, like near the end of the game, had that game-winning boss. Well, it's because they pared their deck down to 3 cards. They were bound to see it. Like they did a good job doing that. So you have to know, like, when you're playing any one of these games, and obviously more that I don't have too much experience in, it's like there's a certain, whether you want to call it philosophy or certain structure or whatever of that game, that if you're just not okay with, even if it's a subconscious type of, then just don't play it. Like you have to be okay knowing, like, this is part of the game. This is how this game works, and that's just part of, you know, like being a TCG player. You know, but yeah, I think I like kind of trailed off with that one, but anyway, but like I said, to your point, it's like, yeah, it's just like the whole philosophy of TCG card games in general is just like, that was redundant. TCG card games. All right, well, I'll errata that one too.
just rewind. just bring that one back.
But yeah. So, anyways, I like I said, I think it's a good thing to note when you're getting into a card game. It's like, you obviously do your best, and you know, take it. You know, well, you want to take it whatever seriously, but just understand like what it is that you're getting yourself into when you're playing that game.
I mean, on that topic of, you know, people playing multiple card games and getting like a taste for everything, with Dragon Ball getting an online client, is there any as a non-Dragon Ball player, this probably will be me learning Dragon Ball. I guess we'll just open the floor. Like, are we excited about this? Is there, like, I mean, I know there's some pros and cons to it definitely coming, and then maybe the question, like, should every game have an online client?
I'll jump in on it first. So, just context for the Dragon Ball one. So, this one isn't going to be for Dragon Ball Super Masters, which is the current format, whatever. It's going to be for Fusion World, which also, I know some of y'all might be like, don't say that, Agent. I think it looks kind of cool. I'm not going to lie. I was looking at the cards. I do like that it has like clearly listed on play effects, not auto, whatever. It says on play. It's got when attacking. Like, I think that's nice because with Dragon Ball right now, shit get a little confusing. It's still like, what's what? So I do like that it's getting pared down. But to the client, I got to play the beta however long ago it was. It was for the Masters. I thought it was really cool. Like, just the fact that it's a card game that's fully animated and it's like use the Dragon Ball, Super Dragon Ball Heroes like animation style, that to me already is a win. I don't care what the gameplay was as for terms of like the rules. Like, it just looks beautiful. The sound effects are great. Like, everything about it is really cool. I think it's going to be important for the game. I think it's going to really kind of let people know that this exists. It doesn't matter if it's Fusion World or if it's Masters. I think just people knowing that it's out there is really good. And I also think that, like, for the purposes of content creation, online clients are great for damn near any card game, right? Because it's so much easier to get people into it who may never have been interested in a card game before. Once they see the animations and they see it, like, it just looks good, people will be interested. Especially people who are like fans, but they've never tried the card game stuff. I think Lorcana kind of got that, and that they don't even have an online client. It's just because it's Disney, and people got interested in card games literally because it was Disney. And I think having an online client in your game is extremely beneficial. The only thing is, don't be EA about it, and don't try and make it such a microtransaction hell that like it just gets too touch and go. I think Pokemon did it right with you. When you buy packs, you're rewarded for the online client. Like, try not to make them two separate systems. I think that, like, everything should feel like one healthy ecosystem. That's my initial thoughts. What about you, Dan?
Yeah, no, I can echo just pretty much everything you just said. I think first and foremost, I'll make the point. What you just said is a TCG being able to have a companion client, not a competing client. It needs to be something that supports the actual in-person card game, right? Because the whole point is, and we've seen this with the transition of a lot more online play, like whether it's webcam or whatever, that players do want to play even if they can't, even if their locals are only once a week or don't have a locals at all, right? People want to play. So if you have an online client, you just give them more opportunities to play your game. So I think from a business perspective, it's a brilliant move. You know, it makes a lot of sense. But yeah, to your point, I think they need to make it to where it makes the most sense, and then it doesn't also compete with their current in-person game, right? Because you don't want to also drive players only to the online client and they never actually pick up the card. So I think with that, we'll just mention Pokemon because we're talking about a Pokemon. I do think they're in a league kind of all their own, just because their IRL tournaments. We talked about the prize support and everything. That was something we talked about like a previous podcast or whatever. Is so outstanding, and they make it to where you want to go to these in person things. But then it's like, okay, well, I don't have a regional this month, or I don't have my league challenge isn't happening or whatever. I'll just hop on and play a few games at home or something, right? That's what that ecosystem, like Agent was talking about, should look like, right? And I think with Dragon Ball, I think one of the reasons why they probably, and I think they said this, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the reason why they weren't going to go the Masters route was because there's so many complex effects and timing and all of that it would be like dev hell to try to like figure all of that out. And that's why they went with two reasons why they created Fusion World was A, to simplify the game for new players, because a lot of new players, myself included, when I was first getting into the game, are apprehensive because like that's just too much. I don't want to read that much. I don't know what all these timings are. Once you get into it, it's a little bit better, but from an approaching standpoint. And then number two, it's a lot easier to program an online client for those, simpler actions. Like a win attacking, it's very easy to just do that versus, auto, when you do this, colon, do that. Like there's just too much to try to figure out with that. So I think because correct me if I'm wrong, Magic has an online client too, right?
Yeah,
and
it's very much so. Arena.
Yeah, and I've heard that one. I have never played it, but I've heard it's really really good. I've seen a couple like clips about it, and it looks really good. The animations of it are really nice. So like between that and like Pokemon, it's like they and I know Magic has some decent complex interactions. So it's like it's obviously possible for these card games to have online clients, and I think that it only supports your player base. And like Agent said, the biggest thing is it allows new players to get into the game without making a huge investment. They can just try it out and see if they like it. And if your card game is as good as it should be, then they're gonna continue. Oh, I want to go get it, because they're gonna look at it and be like, oh, I don't want just these cards on my phone or on my computer. I want these things in real life. I want to actually play with them. So yeah, I think having the online client for that is great. I have to be realistic and say I don't think we'll ever get one for Dragon Ball Masters, depending on how Fusion World goes. But like Agent said, I'm totally fine with it because it's Dragon Ball. I'm gonna play them both anyways. So I don't really care. But
it's interesting though. Like when posing the question, like I've dealt with Magic Arena. It's really well done. We've played other games. I know we've talked about Hearthstone, and like there are other clients that program these things, and you can go kind of, not to say cheap, but like you could go low end and you can go like a Master Duel where like everything's got animations and everything's like popping off, or like every single card in Hearthstone has a catchphrase. Like there's levels to this thing. I do find, I think I agree with you. One thing that worries me is like Magic the Gathering in play draft stuff has really died out. People don't want to pay $35 for an entry for a draft to like play and potentially win stuff when they can draft from the comfort of their home, right? Like I don't have to put on real pants. I can stay here and I can play card games. But I think my mind has kind of altered where like Master Duel is like this weird side thing, right? Where it's like, it's kind of like modern day Yu-Gi-Oh, but we're gonna do some old school stuff with it, and we're just gonna let you play the game here in your own universe or your own ecosystem. We're gonna test some shit here and do stuff. What's nice is it did kind of compete directly, but it was more of like a guidepost where it's like, hey, you don't have someone to learn this game with, and you're trying to figure this shit out. Let us just match you with people online. Let's walk you through a tutorial. Let's get you like the steps started, and then there are people where like that becomes totally the answer, right? Of like, hey, I want to build this deck because I've been playing this deck on Arena and it's really good. Or the Pokemon thing that got me was you have these code cards lying around when you open Pokemon, and you're like, what am I gonna do with these things? I have several ETBs full of these things because I don't know what to do with them. And their pull rates are so much better on the online client, right? Because you can trade cards. There's no money exchange. There's no stuff like that. So it's kind of cool too, because you'd be able to build more decks that you might not have ever touched because you had all the cards laying around and you were watching some YouTube and someone was like, hey, here's this weird black deck I've been playing, and like they can post that and learn. So I think as long as it's complementary, like we were saying, but like Magic felt very, hey, every other format we're going to support in real person, and this format only lives here. That feels like them just like restructuring, and not in like what felt like a positive way or like a
Mm-hmm.
branchable way. Because you could even have these clients when they have like special tournaments and stuff like that. That might bleed into the real world, right? Like Pauper exists, like
Mhm.
a format where you can only play with commons. Like these weird formats come out of nowhere sometimes when like people are just free to the game and the cards and what is there. And then hopefully it does drive people to their local LGSs.
Yeah.
Well, it was interesting when you mentioned like different formats and stuff like that. I think, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a double-edged sword, right? Like sometimes you're gonna see stuff where people only want to play it online because you're right. Like I don't want to spend $35 on a goddamn draft. Like for the most part, like I couldn't see myself wanting to do that when I could just do something like that online and just like not have to worry about, like, it's just easier. But also I think that draft as a format, it's interesting because I know Dragon Ball had it for a little bit and then it just disappeared. Like it's gone. Like you can't even find the draft boxes. I wonder if draft as a thing is something that people really only want to do in like a pre-release format, right? Like, which makes sense because I would go spend $30 on some cards that like early and they're stamped and they're special, and like I feel like this is worth it rather than I could just go buy a draft box and open it on my own if I want to. I think it's kind of knowing your audience, right? I think it's really like knowing what are people coming to this client for. Is it just so that they can play in the comfort of their home and testing? Like, what kind of environment do I want to create around my client? And I think that when you build it too, like Pokemon's really cool because I like that it has like the ladder that you can kind of like this ranked system where you can like, ooh, Master Duel does it too, but I've been playing Pokemon a lot more recently. Of being able to just like test out different deck types and really kind of see how they work, and then play with people at my skill level, so I'm not getting thrown into a room with somebody who's like a world champion or some craziness, and I can actually really kind of test things out in those safer spaces. And I think it also helps people build confidence to go to their locals and try stuff. Because like I've been playing this deck online for like a month, and now I'm ready to go to wherever and try it out. So yeah, no, I do think it's interesting to your point, Farley, just that like it can do weird things to your game if you're not really thinking about like, why am I making this aside from the fact that people want it? Like
Money.
what is the
Yeah.
business community like reason behind making this that's not just I just want players to give me more money. Well, duh, but like it has to be more to it than that.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of what what company, what card game we're talking about, I always try to give them the benefit of the doubt. And I think
Mhm.
just coming from my perspective is like I couldn't coordinate, you know, like um, running an entire actual physical card game and an online client at the same time, while also projecting future sets and different. Like that's a lot. That's a lot, regardless of of how many teams you have and a staff or whatever. That's a lot to put together. Like it's a lot of coordination. On top of all of that, you have to run it from a business aspect, right? That, again, same thing. Whole other conversation. You could talk about the business side of all this stuff all day long, but as a player, it's something that we have to understand of like they're not going to get it perfect, and that's okay. Like we have to understand, but it's also looking at it of like, well, what things could they do, like you said, to implement these practices to be like, okay, because Agent, I love how you said perfectly of like the fact that Pokemon has that client to be like, you know, it's one thing like regardless of whatever card game, there's a lot of anxiety that could go into like going to your first in-person locals, right? Because you've never tested out your deck, you don't have anybody to play with, you're going to be around people that you've never been around before. It's like at least if you can build up that confidence with the deck and like be able to play it through, at least you can take that with you, right? And be like, okay, I'm not going to know anybody, I may be kind of quiet or whatever, but at least I can play, like I know what I'm doing. Yeah, I think the application of an online client, if done properly, again, like Frawley said, like there's certain ways that it could be done to hinder progress, but if you implement it the right way, I think it can only benefit and support your card game ecosystem and like your player base and all of that. So I think it's just trying to nail down how it works, because then you have the whole issue with the Pokemon one where it's like everything about it's great, right? You can try out decks, you can get paired up with like skilled players and all of that, but then people want to complain about, oh well, there's bugs, there's this. What again? It's
Mhm.
not going to be perfect, but it's like it does. Is it trying to at least do what it's intended to do? Yes. So let's just go with that, right? So yeah, I think ultimately to wrap up my point on the online clients is, I think every card game probably should explore the idea of it if they aren't already. But I don't know from a business standpoint, because I know a lot of money goes into that. And if they're not really getting any type of return back off of it, they're going to look at it and be like, well, it's not worth our time. Not really realizing like it's still driving more players to your game. So.
No, I definitely think that's the one thing I was waiting for someone to bring up was the big financial investment. And you'd already mentioned when you have stuff in the pipeline already, it's really hard to be like, we don't know if this thing's going to be here in 6 months. Like we're building a whole thing and investing a whole thing into a client that goes nowhere, and then that's all of our the current cash flow that like we have to be able to do these projects. You do have to, that is the devil's advocate in this one of just like, oh, but of course everything costs money, and if we can't do anything, then what's the point? But yeah, you can always draw attention to yourself, but is it sustainable?
Yeah. I guess the caveat too there was like, if you're a big ass company, if you're Bondi, if you're Disney, if you're Konami, you should have one. Like there's no reason why you shouldn't, because you can afford it and you can monetize it in a way that nobody else can, right? But I think to your point too, I think that's why you see digital only games where like that's the whole thing, right? Like Shadowverse did the reverse. It's been a digital game for years. And then it came out with like a physical game. I don't know how the physical game is doing, but like I know it's a thing. And they made like different rules and stuff for it because it plays a little different. So I mean, I guess there's also that, right? Where sometimes games go from one format to another and are still successful. So yeah, I think that like if money's an issue, that's also a really interesting conversation for to be had of like, well, which is better for your game? Like, is it better to start off as a digital client, which is obviously going to be presumably more expensive, or is it better to do print? I don't know. I think it just depends on the strength of like your marketing for that game.
No, I definitely think digital you get on that because man, physical printing and artists and distribution are crazy.
True, yeah.
But you're right. Once you're a digital game, why would you make a physical game unless there's that much demand for it? It's like, hey man, did you see how much cheaper it was just to put Gamamon on these 3 things and dye them different colors, and now they're buying it. He keeps buying it.
Yeah.
So, and again, I think there's no replacement for in-person tournaments or things that you can get to, like, because as much as the client can offer me it when I'm not with friends or it's late at night or like I can only crack a couple games, there's still no replacement for me booting up and like or kicking out a kitchen table, getting pizza and playing card games. Like I think that's just kind of unbeatable.
Yeah, man.
Well, to that point exactly. We were talking about this right before the pod. Is I finally just like officially registered for my first like in-person like card game regional since November 2019.
Jeez.
So it's been a minute. So at the time of this recording, so it's been almost 4 years since I've actually been. So I've been to like locals and stuff. I've done things like that. Yeah. But as far as like an actual major event, this is the first one that I've actually been registered for. And I can't be more excited. I don't care if I go literally 17. I don't whatever. Like I'm just so excited to be there to meet several people and like hang out with and actually be at that part, because I remember going back to that event. There was a Pokemon event back in 2019 and having the best time. But what we also did? We also played the digital client the night before to like prep for it. So it's like I said, it's just this healthy like symbiotic relationship of everything, being able to do all of that. But yeah, I think it boils down to the business relationship of like, as a company, you still have to, everything's, numbers and columns and whatever. So you just have to kind of leave it up to them and say, are they going to think that it's worth it? So
100%. Yeah, it's interesting, man. I find that like I play a lot more and try a lot more like indie card games and card games just in general when they're digital as well. Like it's a fun way to get people to try it, because I don't gotta go to Target and find it, because that's always a pain in the ass. Because sometimes you go and it's a wasteland. So yeah.
Well, the fact that most of them walk you through a tutorial too, because how many games have you played wrong, like a board game where you were playing with rules wrong because you guys read something and like that's just how you ruled it for forever. Whereas like at least the client's like, no man, you can only use one trainer a turn, no more. No more. At least it prevents you, and it's a much better teacher, and sometimes it's the teacher people need, I feel like, when they don't have anyone else to kind of like bounce ideas off or like study from. But on the other side, I mean, you have infinite free content out there of people talking about stuff and learning about stuff. So nothing's ever really outside of your reach, at least learning wise.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of outside of reach, Lorcana.
Oh, that was a reach.
People can't find stuff. You know what I mean? Like people always coming in and say, "I can't find it. I can't spend my money. I'm trying to spend money and I can't." The second set is coming end of November. If y'all think you will be able to find product, what are some of the cards, if any, that you're interested in for this set?
I'll say this because I haven't looked too much into it. I've actually got the whatever, like the cards that we know about so far.
Yeah.
Up, and I do remember one when it was first announced. And in the spirit of talking about the Digimon ban list, let's talk about Lorcana ban list because I can almost guarantee this card has to like be in the conversation. The 5-drop green bell. It's the legendary. Yeah. It shifts for 3 on any bell. It quests for 3, and it's a 3/3. I don't know what I haven't played enough, so that was attack, defense, or whatever, right? But the interesting effect of it has the Thorny Arrows ability. It says whenever this character is challenged, the challenging character's player discards all cards in their hand. So 2 things. Number 1, it's got a 3 defense, so not any character can just knock it out, right? You're gonna have to invest a little bit into it. Sure, they can get rid of it, fine, if they challenge it. But the biggest thing is they're discarding their hand in classic green fashion. But in Lorcana, the little bit that I've played, and Asian probably can comment on this much better because he's been playing a lot of it, is card hand size is a huge advantage in this game because there's not a lot of draw. There's not a lot of searching. There's not a lot of you're trying to just build up that hand. And to just say, oh, I need to get rid of this, quest for 3 bell on play, but it's going to cost me my entire hand. I mean, that's a pretty big investment. It's like, and the fact that this thing, like, yeah, it's 5-drop, but you can play it on turn 3 and just start going with it. So I think that for me, without looking at the rest of the list, if I had to pick one card, that's the one that I got my eyes on.
That's fair. I think I've only been seeing the Twitter spoilers and only having 4 games under my belt. I can't talk about stuff, but that Madam Mim card was looking good for a little bit. I think that just got released like yesterday or something. I don't know enough about this game to talk about this, honestly.
Well, then I guess
this is next on my list. But man, like you're right with product, it is the reprint of the first set should be out soon. Hopefully, they did say October, so I'm hoping to start seeing those again. But man, if set 2 drops before a set 1 reprint, man, this game's gonna be hard to actually play with people.
Yeah. Well, kind of, I pulled up the list too. I'm scrolling back through. It's interesting, right? Because I think the bell is really good, but I also don't know if it's gonna be as gross. Like, it's gross looking at it. Like, I'm looking at it right now. It all depends on how much removal is going to exist across colors. Because for me, with my deck, I could give a damn less. Okay, cool. Be Prepared or Dragonfire, it's gone. Maleficent, it's gone. Like, there's a lot of just ways to banish it, at least in my deck. I can only really speak to my play style. So I'm curious to see when you look through some of these other cards, what how much removal is getting spread throughout the colors and in what way, right? Like blue could be like, cool, let it go. She's gone. She can just go and sit down in energy. And the fact that it's uninkable, I think, is also nice. So your opponent's just got to sit on this thing for 5 turns, right? And if you're playing against certain decks, I might make you discard it. It might go away. But I do think it's really strong. I do think it's really good. I also, though, I think people are going to gravitate towards it a little too hard almost. And like overlook some of the removal options. Again, I haven't looked at everything in the set yet. And yes, I guess technically speaking, it's shift 3, so you could play it like, I don't know what the cheapest bell is right now. Whatever the cheapest bell is, and then from turn 3 onward. I can't remember if the cheapest bell is a 5-drop, unless they put a new one, or is it the cheapest bell a 2 or a 3? I don't remember. Sorry guys, I've been so focused on Dragon Ball that like I haven't really been reading too far ahead. But I can say that yeah, I do wonder if Lorcana is gonna do a restricted ban list because some of these cards seem crazy. But I've yet to experience Lorcana in such a way that made me feel like, oh my god, these cards need to be hit. You know, like I feel like with Digimon, it was very quick. that you felt the feeling of, this card's gotta go. This can't stay here. Mega Digimon Fusion, Hidden Potential, Looking at You, where you're like, no, these two,
Please destroy Ice Wall.
Ice Wall, yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm praying that we're able to get freaking products at a quickly, because they keep saying that they're basically gonna flood the market with the stuff, and I hope that happens really soon, because I cannot wait to watch these prices plummet, because I think last time I checked, a booster box is still like $300 something, and then even the pre-orders for set 2 is the same way. I think Belle right now, yeah, she's a legendary, but that Belle is going for $100 for some reason as a pre-order, which is absurd. I don't think that price will stick, but yeah.
With Lorcana, I think the prices will normalize. I think that we'll get to a point where it'll be easy enough to afford. I just think it's going to take a little bit longer, maybe, than some people might like. The only thing I'll say about all this, right, and I'm going to throw Frolly here and alley-oop, is I cannot get over the cold foils, man. I can't do it. I understand shiny cardboard, but if you're going to make a foil version of it, either A, do what you did, but don't make them like astronomically like a bigger price difference, or like do a different art or something, or like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I feel like they're too janky to like want to like max rare a deck. You know what I mean? And again, we're still early. I get that, because like you can look at games like Digimon or whatever, and like they changed up things, but I feel like for now, if we're talking strictly about price point and like entry into the game, I don't think cold foils are near worth the investment. So if you're going to get into the game, don't even look at like those types of variants of the cards. Literally just go straight for the regular versions. And I think those versions specifically will normalize in price. So we'll get to a point where the game will be affordable, I think.
Yeah, I almost wonder if they're more worried about getting product out before Christmas than they're even worried about hitting a ban list yet. No official tournaments or anything. Yeah. I think they're just praying they get product out the door for Christmas. And especially with how lucrative it must be right now to run a printing press. Like, I think I mentioned that last time. Like, that's the thing, is buying. It's not even having the money, because I have the money. It's buying the time. It's being able to scoot in there with Magic and Dragon Ball and Digimon and all these other established games who are getting printed, and you're like, you're just in line, man. It's like, we're Disney. It's like, I know, but you're in line, man. So
honestly, they just need to make their own. Sorry, they just need to,
just
get their own.
I was literally about to say the same thing. Yep, same thing.
They could do it, but do they have the expertise? Or like, was the other thing, like, could they not have shopped it out to multiple shops? Like, I wonder, like, if they I mean, we talked about how obviously they're going to underestimate the market, because we didn't know how many people wanted to get into Lorcana. But man, if you could only buy time at one place, it would have been worth it to buy time at multiple places and try to like book a different thing, just because maybe you would have got more product out or seeing it. And now with the second set dropping, I just hope that there is some set 1 out before set 2, or I worry, especially going into Christmas, it becomes another thing to scalp. But Lorcana, I do believe, can weather this storm, because it's got Daddy Disney behind it. Like, I can see set 3, set 4 starting to normalize, because I think that right now they're like, we're gonna stabilize anytime, guys. Anytime, we're totally gonna. And every time we've had this from a bunch of corporations recently, it's a longer timeline than they want to give us. Like, they want to tell us it's a little bit, but really there's a lot. So maybe by March we're more stabilized. We hit chapter 3. We're waiting for the launch of chapter 4, and stuff starts to harmonize. I mean, that's, I guess, the hope for anyone who like really wants to see this game take off.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll say it's definitely apples to oranges, but both of you guys know, because I mean, we're all pretty much at this point, since the beginning of Digimon's inception, we all remember, set 1 and like, original started, like this game wasn't that affordable at the beginning. Like, singles were hard to come by. Like, product availability was tough. But then by set 3, 4, like everybody had their starter decks. Everybody had, like, it just takes a little bit of time. I understand, again, it's Bandai. They have established printing with other games. Again, it's different. But in terms of life of a game, of a card game, that intends to stick around for a while as a major IP, I think they're pretty much on the right track. Like Frolly said, though, I think it's just the timeline that they're giving us isn't quite exact to what they want it to be.
Yeah.
But we'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that like it's stuff that's beyond their control for the most part, generally speaking, and that like yeah, it'll normalize. People are still rabid for the game. Like people are still paying the crazy prices, which is the fact that people are consistently paying it shows they're interested. Is it effed up that they're having to pay these prices? Yes, but like it shows that no, people will weather the storm, whether they're collecting, whether they're playing, whether they kids or whatever the case. Like this game will stick around whether people want it to or not. Doesn't matter. It's gonna be here. It's got Disney behind it, but also it's been huge. I think in just getting new people to play this game. And yeah, by set like 3, 4, you'll probably start seeing stuff at Walmarts and Targets and whatnot. And like by then, like scalping will be pointless. I mean, this is literally what happened to Pokemon during COVID. Like everybody, there was that huge craze. And Dan, you probably know better than me. This was before we met, but like I remember with not only just that, but it was people were scalping or buying stuff so they could go get it in slabs that like freaking oh god, not Beckett, the other one, PSA was like backed up for like 6 months or some craziness because people were just sending
18,
Pokemon stuff.
18.
Jesus.
It was a year and a half. Buddies of mine that would submit stuff to PSA that would get it in their standard 3-4 month turnaround time. We're waiting a year or longer getting stuff back, dude. That without jumping down that rabbit hole, man, that was a terrible time to try to be a Pokemon player, especially when all you could really do was just play card games inside with people, like with your friends or family or whatever, because you couldn't go anywhere. And it's like you couldn't get your hands on product, and because it wasn't even so much like it was partly because of scalpers, but it was also because they shut down certain printing presses. They shut down that's a big thing about what I think a lot of people maybe don't understand about how all of the logistics of getting cards not just made and manufactured but distributed and sent out to stores and things like that. It's like there's a lot that goes into it, and when you start shutting down certain links in those chains, it backs up everything, especially when you're talking production that's a year, 2 years out. So yeah, that was a terrible time for Pokemon. I think looking at I'm glad you brought up that example. If you look at something like that with Pokemon versus where we are right now with Lorcana, again, apples to oranges, they're nowhere near close. Close. Lorcana's in such a healthier spot, and like you said, if people are willing to pay these price points, not even just for legendaries, but for rares, commons, whatever, they're obviously wanting to play the game. So if you continue to perpetuate that and support the quantity of cards that are on the market and you're just going to drive more people to the game, because it's like, oh, we already wanted to play, we just couldn't get past that price point, but now we can, so now we're going to start playing too, right? So yeah, it's just going to come with time.
I mean, talking about weird ways of viewing it too, it's almost like we had back in the day we used to have Toy of the Year, right? Like what was going to be the hottest product for the holidays, and who would have thought it was Lorcana way before the holidays even hit. Like we knew this was going to be big, but I do feel like even all the negative press of, oh, no one has it, it's gone, it's everywhere, it's surging, these prices are crazy, it's all a story though that you're being told about Lorcana, about how it's going and where it's gonna go, and it's almost like the bad buzz is still good buzz. Truly, it's one of those weird things of it makes it more desirable to get these things, or you might justify splurging on something where you're like, I can't get this anywhere, but if I can get this, I get the chance of doing some. It makes it more exclusive. It's weird to watch a super negative, because everyone's sitting there going, they're losing millions of dollars, which, yeah, if we had infinite cards, we would be losing money. But for the cards they had and the money they made, I think they've been doing pretty good.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's interesting to watch with Lorcana, and watching stores make do with what they got, and community still showing up every week and still wanting to play. The game's gonna be fine. But I did want to circle back to what you said, Dan, about the cold foils. I agree, y'all. don't be trying to like max. Like if you like them, cool. But I tell you right now, I open up stuff. And y'all know me. Look at my Dragon Ball decks, okay, and my Digimon decks. I'm a max rarity nut job, and will will buy these all stars just because it looks pretty and it makes me feel like the deck somehow works better, which we all know isn't true. But I will never do that for Lorcana. I just why? They don't feel that much different in my hand. Like when I'm actually like, there's no different shuffle feel. Like it's just, don't worry about it, man. I can't tell you how many cold foils I've just sold that I don't know why people were bought them, because why? But it's not that deep. Don't do it. Don't do it, especially with the prices this high. I think like the difference between like a regular Maleficent, the dragon one, which I need like 3 more of, unfortunately, is like the regular one's like $30 and the foil is like 100. Why? I don't understand. You can't even really see it, like that it's foil on a webcam. But whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. So you have, let's just put it this way: your regular is like, yeah, like $35, which isn't like terrible. And then, yeah, cold foil is 100 plus. Like that's just wild, and they're the exact same thing. But if you had a Maleficent, mind you, this is a legendary, right? So similar to like an SR or something in other card games or whatever. They have alternate art versions, so you could say the same thing with Pokemon, with Dragon Ball, Digimon, whatever, right? If they would have had an alternate art version of Maleficent, right? It doesn't have to be an enchanted rare or nothing like that. Just an alternate art version of it that was still $100. It's like, okay, I don't feel so bad about it because it's a different art, but I'm basically paying a $70 premium on top of, for it to just be shiny. Like, no, like I'm not gonna do that. Like, where's the value in that, right? So that's my only qualm with it, right? But as far as the game itself and price points, I don't think $35 for a legendary is terrible. I think it is kind of high. The card is very good. Like we're talking about that card. The card's very good. Like all that's fine or whatever. And if you want to like go for that, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But I think over time you're going to see cards like that normalize in price to come down to SR. Like just to kind of throw a comparison, the new Charizard from the Pokemon set from Obsidian Flames, that's highly playable right now. It's a good card. I was just looking them up because I need to get some for myself, are like $18-19. That's, and you need 4 of them. So like, it's not that off from what, a card like Maleficent's doing. And Pokemon's been out for what, 27, 28 years, something like that. So when you put it in perspective, it's like, that's pretty close. And they haven't even hit their second set yet. So I was one of those that like, when the card game first came out, I was like, I'm dead set. I'm not going to play it because it's just too expensive, whatever. But I've started coming around seeing like, I definitely think the prices are going to normalize. It's going to be a very much more approachable game. I think it's just going back to what Frawley said. It's just going to take a little bit more time than people might like is all.
Well, these are also like we were saying, obviously shows interest. Like I would almost call these hype prices. Like this is when it sets pre-releasing. And then like it comes out and it's like, cool, that card that was $100 is like $40 and I will now get it. Like I that's how I'm kind of feeling with like waiting for the bubble to go a little bit. Also, like, are we subversive now that we all love really shiny cardboard, but we're directly saying that this shiny cardboard isn't worth it? Like it's so funny to be in this position of like, I buy alt arts, I buy art I like, and I spend more money on a card that does the exact same thing because it's prettier. But you shouldn't do that for this card game. This might be hypocritical. It might be the slightest. But I agree with you. I'm glad you boys are with me from last episode where I'm like, what is cold foiling? I never thought I would miss Pokemon holo rares, but damn do I miss it sometimes because everything's got cold foils.
Yeah.
But to your point though, holo rares for Pokemon, depending on, there's so many of them, right? But like in a general sense, holo rares for Pokemon do not have that big of a price discrepancy from their normal versions.
Not really.
Because we want to talk about, Pokemon holo rares are the same art or whatever. They are, but you're not paying a $30 difference for the same card. It may go from like 50 cents, 75 cents to like $2 or something, or $3. Yeah, it's fine. I'll be willing to spend that to, like, if I wanted a holo version of like all my cards for that, but I'm not going to spend, that much more on the same. So it's like when you're talking about, I'm willing to spend, money on holo alt art versions or whatever. It's like, if I feel like, me personally, I'm getting the commensurate value for what I'm spending. But if the card is literally the same, it's just shiny, but it's like 300, 400%, however much more it is, it's not worth it, in my opinion.
Yeah, but I also think that, you know, a major difference too is when you look at like the Lorcana stuff. The only reason I would tell somebody to buy cold foil literally is if you're someone who's making a one of binder and you just want it foil for your deck.
Yeah.
Hell no, that's $400 for 4 Maleficents. Like, I need 4 Maleficents total. I would never spend that much. Like, no. Even in like games that I enjoy playing, I would, if my Agumon box topper dude was like $100 a copy, no, it's okay, I'll figure something else out. No. And like, I think that with like Lorcana, it's wild to watch people go out and buy like mad copies of stuff like this. Like, I understand the hype, and I understand that there's also maybe a thought of, ooh, the value on this is going to go up. It really might. You never know. Because I will say, pulling cold foils for some of these legendaries is, I've opened up way too many Lorcana packs, and I have only gotten, I think, a couple cold foil legendaries, like Hades and Bell, which, thank you for the premium, because I just sold them out to other people who wanted to spend that much. But yeah, if you're looking to get into the game, you're trying to play, right now is not the time to say, let me max rarity in my deck. Like, that now is not the time to even think about it. Unless you got a ton of money to blow, I guess. I wouldn't.
In which case, like, support us. Shameless self plug.
Yeah, hey.
It says sell your soul.
Oh man. Yeah. So
no, I feel you for that though. Like, especially like expecting these things to crash and get there. Like, it's just silly to do it at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, but one card, I know we're jumping back in Lorcana, that I just saw that I was looking through that seems like it's going to be crazy for purple. It's a 3-cost item that you tap it and you gain a lore. I was like, if this can't be, it's one, you tap once. So you play 4 of these, you could gain 4 lore. What? Like that I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what kind of removal is going to be around for items now too.
You have, is it the Steel Beast? Which one's the one?
Steel Beast will pop.
Will pop it, right? But correct me if I'm wrong. I know characters have summoning sickness, but do items. So if I play an item down, I can use it the turn that it gets played.
Yes.
If it's the way Magic, yeah.
So yes, if I play my item down that turn, I can just boom. It's an automatic lore that, for the most part, unless you're playing like something specific like Steel or whatever, is uninteractable.
Yeah. So turn 4, you could do that. Yeah, you pay 3, boom, and then next turn you could tap it and you could gain a lore. And then it's just out there, right? And like with my deck, I'm already thinking about just things that are gonna make people mad. Like, I don't even have to worry about characters at that point, right? Like, I'm like, cool, I'm just trying to get out these guys, leave this over here, and then just have my other characters draw me more cards and just make your life a living hell. That's gonna be interesting to see how that's all gonna interact. But that's why I feel like, because of random stuff like that, Bell is good, but I think there's gonna be other boogeymen, women, creatures, people of like the format. Like, I think there's gonna be a lot of just stuff that is like, oh, this does that, which I think is good for the game. I think Lorcana is gonna have a lot of that compared to some of these other games with the mix and match in the deck building. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that's all the thoughts I had for this week. I'm surprised my brain is still functioning, to be honest with you, and I'm about to play more Dragon Ball, so this is bad. But any closing statements or additional thoughts from anybody?
I mean, I can't remember if it was blue or yellow that has the item and like has people who are benefiting from the questing off the items. But that combo seems great. I think you splash that in, especially if you can just abuse it. Final thoughts, as per usual. Thank you for joining us. Support your local LGS. Play more card games. And you guys taking your time out of your day to listen to us is like really cool. And I just want to pass my love of card games and like this experience on to you guys.
Yeah, I'm gonna echo that point, which what Frawley just said, because I should have had this pulled up already. There it is. I'm gonna look this up really quick because I thought that this blew my mind. Yeah, the last one that we did, and I told agents this. We were talking a week or so ago. The last podcast that we did is currently sitting at 3,300 views, which
Wow.
for me, I'm not a YouTube person. I don't know what that means, but I'm like, that is a lot of, like, I don't think I've amassed that amount of views on my Twitch channel, and I've streamed for like 2 years now. So like, it's like putting that in perspective for me, it's like, that's wild to think whether people actually agree with some of our opinions, or they absolutely hate them, or whatever. The fact that like that many people like tune into the podcast for any length of time to get those kind of like numbers is astounding to me. Because like when I saw that for the first time, like, holy crap, I'm on a video that has 3,300 views. Like I was like, that's wild. So I just appreciate the fact that, you know, you guys, I say this all the time, but you guys like give me the opportunity to be here and like be able to share my level card games and just kind of talk spit for an hour plus and just, you know, whatever. So yeah, I love that.
Awesome. Well, first off, yes, thank you to everybody who's tuned in, specifically to the last episode, but every episode before then. We're getting back into the groove, I think, of monthly, basically. You know, life was being life for a little while. I think, yeah, no, I just thank you guys for joining me every month, and Frawley and Dan always for submitting ideas and things to talk about. Because sometimes I'm just like, I don't know what we're doing. Help! I just edit. So I really appreciate you guys and all that. And to everybody viewing, man, thank you for spending the hour and some change with us. If you have things that you'd like to hear us talk about, just feel free to drop in the comment section, and we'll do it eventually. I can't promise it'll be next month, but it will eventually happen. And yeah, y'all, take care. Have an awesome rest of the day, morning, night, and whatever it is when you're tuning in. And peace.